As usual, I will start with a prayer. May all those who are afflicted by affliction may be affliction free. May they be serene with all their ills, even if bodily afflictions do not subside. May they be healed, all of them, including me. Honorable President of Nagpur OBGYN Society, Dr. Vaidehi Marathe, and through her, all the past and future presidents of that organization. Honorable Secretary, Dr. Rajasi, and through her, all the other members of Nagpur Society. Dr. Swati Sarada, who has been coordinating this entire program. My friends who are present here from all over the country. I can see people from Patna, from Ahmedabad, from Allahabad, from Jalandhar, from Chennai, from Coimbatore, from Durgapur, from Bokaro, from Indore, from Gwalior, and where not. That is your kindness. I am really thankful to you for encouraging me. And we will start today. Just a second. Okay. We will start today with an introduction of our very own obstetricians. Obstetricians are multitasking people. I know most of them are females and therefore they are as such multitasking. But what I have found is that in obstetrics also, they are multitasking. They get patients, they get mothers who are pregnant and can have a heart disease, are pregnant, can have corona, are pregnant, can get a fracture, are pregnant, can get a dermatological condition, are pregnant, can get malignancy, are pregnant and can have a psychological disturbance, whatnot, are pregnant and can get beaten up, are pregnant and can get raped. I am simply amazed, and I am amazed at this creation which we call a woman and the obstetricians who serve them. We are fortunate that we have some very wonderful people to help us and support us, and amongst them I rank physicians as quite high. The highest are our anesthetists and pediatricians, and along with them our friendly physicians. We are going to discuss today tricky situations in medical disorders in pregnancy, to which Vaidehi has given a twist and added dodge the bullet to it. Let us go. Shall we go, Vaidehi? Yes.
Yes, sir, please.
Usually I conduct this session as a panel discussion, where me as a fool can always ask more questions than what the wise panelist can answer. But today I cannot escape. I have to raise questions and I have to answer. That was what I was telling our friend from Bokaro. I conducted this session there more than a year before. Of course, some situations have surely changed. But There, they were giving the answers and I was asking questions. Let us see this first situation. Mrs. A, 30 years, referred to Medical College Hospital with she had delivered vaginally at a private medical college. Just a second, I will take a laser pointer. Yeah, at a private medical college hospital, after which she developed this severe PPH. Vaginal exploration was done twice, and one stated cervical tear was sutured. Stated, because we as obstetricians always try to find our own faults. I have seen this. Hardly any faculty or any discipline is as humble as obstetricians are. कुछ हमारा ही गलती होगा, कुछ हमसे मिस हुआ होगा. So even a cervical tear which was not bleeding was sutured. Okay, vaginal exploration done twice, but she continued to bleed. She received 11 units of blood transfusion, but PPH continued, and she was referred to Medical College Hospital. Antenatal records showed a rise of BP to 140/90, and 1 or 2 episodes of gum bleeding that was treated as a common ailment in 3rd trimester. When she was received on clinical examination, pulse was 140, blood pressure 140/70, purpuric spots all over the body, and ecchymosis at injection site. Per abdomen uterus was firm, well contracted. So atonicity is ruled out. Okay, every point is important. Liver and spleen were not palpable. There was no sternal tenderness, and bleeding PV was present. Then preliminary investigation reports came. It showed that the bleeding time was 1 minute 30 seconds. So not much disturbed, not altered at all. Prothrombin time 13.7 seconds. Clotting time 3 minutes. And fibrinogen was 160 milligram per deciliter. Please remember this. You can even scribble them down because you require some of the investigation subsequently to understand why these things happen. There was a pancytopenia with platelet count of 42,000. The differential count showed neutrophils 29, lymphocytes 60, eosinophil 1, but monocytes 10, in which neutrophilic metamyelocytes were 13%, promyelocytes 8%, and blast cells were present more than 20%. This should give you the diagnosis that this was nothing to do with any of the obstetric condition. We are dealing with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which presents as a postpartum hemorrhage. So every time we need not go on abusing our own self. In this situation, how will you manage? Because this patient will come in your emergency unit. I remember one of my, now he is a head of the department at Bothri Medical College, Dr. Ashish has joined. And when he was doing his residency, he got Ashish had gone because he was very competent, he had gone himself, I had sent him, I had confidence in him to manage a bleeding in emergency, in the main emergency of the hospital. And he rang me up and said, sir, this does not seem to be obstetric and still she is bleeding. This can happen. And this has happened here. This is not that case, this is a different case. Manage her. What will we do? Our management is simple. Manage her PPH crisis. She has a bleeding diathesis. Control her bleeding. Her platelets are low. Give her platelets and control her bleeding. Then comes management of leukemia, which our physician friends will do. So this is the message. I'll be giving you crisp messages, and this is how we'll manage this case. What happened to the case? Crisis got over. Then subsequently physicians took over. Let us see the next case. How a seemingly easy case suddenly became difficult, and an obstetrician picked up what was the difficulty. Let us see this. Mrs. B, 27 years, primigravida, was progressing normally till 20 weeks of pregnancy when she developed severe dyspnea. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who want to be very much involved, you can pull out a scribble pad, and if you find something, because you might have to refer this back when you come to the management and to align yourself with the management policies which I'll be giving. She was diagnosed with a case of pulmonary cox in view of gross congestion of the lungs. She was put on AKT and she worsened. Now, this diagnosis of pulmonary collapse was not by the obstetrician. It was by a physician. That is okay. That is okay. I am not here to criticize anybody. But she was put on AKT and worsened. And when she worsened, she came to the obstetrician who was giving her antenatal care. Of course, she needed a review. And the obstetrician was wondering why this has happened. She reviewed thoroughly. This case comes to us from somewhere in northeast in Assam area. On examination, she was 22 weeks pregnant with presenting part being vertex. FHS 160 plus, no pedal edema, and she was not anemic. The obstetrician went on reviewing the case, and that is where she carefully auscultated. She had previously auscultated, but she once again auscultated. And if you can hear, I know the volume is low, there is a diastolic murmur with a distinct presystolic accentuation. This was the murmur. That was clear case of mitral stenosis. It was a tight mitral stenosis with acute left heart failure. She was put on immediate left heart failure treatment, and this was her condition of the mitral valve. So as I told you, she was pregnant, a tight mitral stenosis. Investigation confirmed the mitral was only 0.8 square centimeters in area, when normal is expected to be 4 to 6. Those figures which you may not know as obstetrician, therefore I am assisting. Medical treatment was instituted and she was stabilized. Now the question for you and me is that can we do a valvuloplasty now? This is interesting, and the answer is very easy. Answer is yes. If you want this patient to undergo a valvuloplasty, a balloon valvuloplasty, then mid-trimester is the safest period. It is safe and a useful procedure during pregnancy with no short or long-term adverse effects on the mother as well as their obstetric future. The children born of subsequent pregnancies exhibited normal physical and mental development. So valvuloplasty now, once stable, yes. Now, how to handle her cesarean section? Preferably, cesarean section should be done in regional block. And prepare any special care? You know the answer. Avoid infection at all costs. That's all. Keep a watch on her heart rate. A tachycardia is ominous. Immediately go in and find out the cause. So this was a mitral stenosis with pregnancy mid-trimester. This is a routine nowadays, where somebody coughs and we are continuously to wear a mask. I am not going to touch a single case of corona because Vaidya has already organized enough sessions on corona. No corona today. We'll see something else. This is such a routine case. A 26 years old, gravida 1, 31 weeks pregnant, presented with complaints of epigastric pain, gum bleeding and petechial hemorrhage for 1 day. She had a high-grade fever for 5 days prior to admission. She was first seen at antenatal clinic at 12 weeks of pregnancy, and then after all was going smooth. This case comes to us from my very dear friend. I have included 2 of his cases, Dr. Deepak Bhagde from Jamnagar. And see what happened. Sir was giving antenatal care, and see what happened. At 12 weeks pregnancy, and then after everything was going smooth, but then at 31 weeks, she developed epigastric pain, gum bleeding, and high-grade fever for 5 days prior to admission. You can put your differential diagnosis. Body temperature was 37 when she was received at the hospital. Blood pressure was 110/80. Pulse rate 80 per minute. Respiratory rate was 20. Okay. Now then what happens? She had mild dehydration, normal breathing and heart sound. Liver was enlarged 1 centimeter below the right costal margin with mild tenderness. Fundal height was compatible with 31 weeks of gestation. Fetal heart was 144. Petechiae size around 1 to 2 millimeter were found around her face, forearms and both the thighs. Then the obstetrician started digging deeper. And they got laboratory investigations done repeatedly also. And what they found? Hemoglobin was fine, 11.9. Hematocrit 38%. We know the normal is between 36 to 48%. White blood cell count 7440, 50% neutrophils, 45% lymphocytes, and 3% atypical lymphocytes. I am not going on malignancy. We have already discussed malignancy, and therefore I am not going to repeat it. Platelet count 10,100. That is where the clue comes. You can put your diagnosis and then make with your own self. Platelet count was 10,100, around 30 weeks pregnancy. The diagnosis, they got a specific viral test, a specific dengue test done, and they found that patient was actually having a dengue fever in pregnancy. And this is the season when dengue was becoming very common. It is seen nowadays. One of the politicians has got involved. That is okay. But then, because corona is overshadowing everything, we have forgotten this potentially very dangerous condition. You can see that the vector behind. She was put on treated with IV fluids. We know that in dengue there is no specific treatment. She was put under close observation for vital signs and bleeding diathesis. Remember, her platelet count was already low. Heads up to the team, she was not bleeding as yet. 24 hours later, epigastric pain disappeared. Vital signs were within normal limits. Hematocrit had fallen a little, 30%, and platelet count came to only 6320. But she was not bleeding. Ladies and gentlemen, I would not have brought this case. It was a routine sort of a dengue fever. 6320. And none of my cases are out of my hat. No bluffing, no fekugiri. Completely pure, genuine cases. Platelet concentration was prepared and kept ready, but it was not used. And that is where the experience of the obstetrician counts. Those of you who know Dr. Deepak Bhatt, they know this. As a very experienced obstetrician, his experience counts, and we learn from his experience that patient is not bleeding. She is not in labor, nothing. There are only petechiae there. They waited. On the third day, she gradually recovered, had an itching convalescence of rash and rash on both thighs. The hematocrit started slowly rising to 31%. Platelets slowly rose to 15,000. She was discharged on 4th day. On 1 week follow-up, she was healthy. Hematocrit was 32%. Platelet was 3,54,000. So have confidence in your knowledge and have confidence in the patient's recovery system. What happened in labor? At 39 weeks, they waited. After 8 weeks, she went in a spontaneous labor, delivered a healthy female weighing 2630 grams with a good Apgar, and no abnormality was detected in the newborn. That was dengue. Now we see a case where how suddenly the picture changes. This is, you may not call it classical medical case, but then how suddenly the picture changed. A young primary gravida, aged 22 years, regular antenatal care, came with complaints of 36-week pregnancy and pain in abdomen and fever. Pulse 110, BP 110/76. Mild tachypnea was noted. Uterus was full term, relaxed. FHS 90 to 100 per minute. Os was closed. In view of severe fetal bradycardia, she was taken up for LSCS. Please note, you have all noted this, that she was already 36 weeks pregnant, and she had fever, but because of bradycardia, she was taken up for LSCS. Now what they found? There was blood-stained fluid in the peritoneal cavity. It was more of blood actually, rather than blood-stained fluid in the peritoneal cavity. Uterus was intact. However, the child was lost. A fresh stillbirth was delivered. By the time she was taken for section, the decision was made, an actual section was done, the child was lost. And you will realize soon why the child was lost. The morbidity was such that it can kill the child. A surgeon's opinion was requested because there was blood operatively if we are missing something. And that is where the surgeon also went into this sort of a maze. What is happening? No apparent injury, no cause of hemorrhage was found in abdominal cavity or examination. Patient was stable only with IV fluids. Boldly they decided to close the abdomen because there is nothing inside. What is the point in keeping that abdomen open? They closed it and they confirmed the hemostasis and kept a drainage. Now that is where in post-operatively something happened. There was a collapse, sudden collapse. After 12 hours, her urine output was 800 ml, so that is quite good, around 60 ml plus. Intra-abdominal drain had insignificant collection. Total count was 21,500. She was revived successfully and referred to a tertiary center. Now what did they do? She was ventilated on admission. Her vital parameters remained within normal limits. On further investigations, it was found that USG detected pancreatitis. Her serum amylase was abnormally high and she recovered fully. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want you to be afraid, but I want you to be aware that these cases do take place and we get unnecessarily get caught in crossfire. So be aware of it, that yes, there can be such an eventuality. How will you manage such a situation? From an obstetrician's viewpoint, conservative medical management of acute pancreatitis is the mainstay of treatment. Surgical management can be carried out in pregnancy somewhere around mid-trimester max. As the uterus grows, it is very difficult. Some patients may need an ERCP for common bile duct stones, which are known to cause pancreatitis, even in pregnancy. If in antenatal period, still don't worry, there is a favorable obstetric outcome possible. Some patient can develop multiple intra-abdominal fluid collections postpartum, which can be drained by suitable drainage catheter with a satisfactory outcome. Okay. There is one more type of pancreatitis which you will see. It is hypertriglyceridemia induced pancreatitis. Hypertriglyceride induced pancreatitis. I have seen one such case. Therefore, I am telling you. This hypertriglyceridemia is because of pregnancy. High estrogen levels produce this. And there is a familial tendency. I picked it up from asking a family history. This happened in a medical college. When I was in the medical college. I was not worried. My residents were alarmed. I said, don't worry. After delivery, triglyceride levels will fall. And they did fall and everything was fine. So please be aware of this. This session is not to, I will be bringing some routine cases also, but also some rare cases. So that's a good mixture where we can handle them with more confidence. And I am not expecting you to be master cardiologist or a master nephrologist or an interventional cardiologist or something. No, we are obstetricians, but we are most of the times on the front line and therefore called to manage. So let us not be afraid that, oh yes, I heard Dr. Pankaj Desai discussing such a case. This could be that. Let us investigate, and that helps. The next case is where a common crisis occurs. In fact, it kills quite commonly. A primigravida with 37 weeks pregnancy with severe preeclampsia and twin gestation was admitted at a private hospital for elective LSCS. Because it was twins and severe preeclampsia, they must have decided for cesarean section. On operating table, the patient was detected to have extensive crepitations in the lung field. Surgery was not yet started. The anesthetist detected and 85% oxygen saturation. Anesthetist saw this and had not yet induced anesthesia. I am sure you will agree with me that this surgery has to be abandoned. The surgery was indeed abandoned. 60 milligram of furosemide was given. The patient was intubated and transferred along with an anesthetist escort. When the patient arrived at the tertiary hospital, in this case a medical college hospital, she had 97% oxygen saturation along with extensive crepitation. So timely decision, see how the obstetrician can help. The mitral cirrhosis case also, the obstetrician decided, took a brilliant decision. The case of leukemia, once again the obstetrician took a brilliant decision that PPH is not because of our cause, and therefore managed it smartly. This even pancreatitis, brilliant and masterly decision by the obstetrician, called in the surgeon and did not panic, and subsequently the patient came around. When the patient arrived here in this case at the tertiary hospital, she had 97% oxygen saturation with extensive crepitations. She was fully dilated. Now what to do? Allow her a cesarean delivery or do a cesarean section? Of course, Vaidehi and all who are present here, Rosa and all will agree with me, even Rajsi will tell that no, sir, this now we have to allow a vaginal delivery. There is a full dilatation, head quite close. She was, yes, diagnosed as pulmonary edema, a scary complication of preeclampsia. We all know this. It is one of the common killers of preeclampsia, eclampsia. Patient was shifted to ventilatory support, furosemide was given, and the choice was whether vacuum or forceps. It depends on whether the prerequisites could be met and your dexterity. I am comfortable with both. If the prerequisites are met, I would like to do a forceps, but my wife would like to do a vacuum. That is fine. That is fine, because nowadays in vacuum also you need not wait for that chignon to be created for 8 minutes. No need. You can straightway apply an assisting traction. So both are fine. Diuretics were repeated every 6 hours. Antihypertensive administered. Ventilatory support was given for 24 hours, and the patient was slowly weaned off her respiratory support. She was fine. So once again, brilliant work done by obstetrician, fine decision making and seeking help. Now we are going to go fishing. Let us see who can pick up the fish. Let us see. I will be continuously assisting you. You please challenge yourself to the diagnosis and let us see what happens. 29 years old, female, G1P1, readmitted, therefore G1P1, readmitted 2 weeks post-vaginal delivery due to increased vaginal bleeding. Okay. She reports that the bleeding began on the 10th day after delivery and has increased in severity each subsequent day. Bleeding began on the 10th day after delivery and has increased in severity each subsequent day. Delivery was uncomplicated with minimal blood loss. All problems started the 10th day. Just as in corona they start on the 5th day, here it started on the 10th day. Remember this. She had taken 20 milligrams of ibuprofen daily since delivery, probably for relief of episiotomy pain. The patient reported a medical history of iron deficiency anemia due to menorrhagia. If you want to attribute it to this, fine, but then the investigations will help you ruling out both these diagnoses. She was adopted, therefore she does not know anything of her family history. Since admission, the patient had received 3 units of blood. The obstetric team ruled out retained placental tissue and uterine atony as the cause of bleeding, including the delayed involution of placental site. They have been ruled out by color Doppler. Everything, the uterine involution was going fine. Sorry to add, means not sorry, but just alerting you, it doesn't happen in India, but there was no history of sexual intercourse. This also is just an additional history. Therefore, they decided to look at the blood and look intently at blood. Laboratory values. Now, please, you can note these down because some of them I will bring them back. Don't worry. Hemoglobin was 2.1, means she has bled, and she has really bled. Platelets 110,000, so they are normal. APTT 40 seconds, normal 25 to 30 seconds. I am going slow so that you will remember these values. I will bring them back because these are going to be critical, because these things happen in our clinics, in our hospital after admission. Prothrombin time, normal, 15 seconds. Fibrinogen, 200, normal. So now what is your differential diagnosis? I would have asked this to the panel, but there is no panel discussion, so I will give the differential diagnosis. With the help of the hematologist, These were the differential diagnoses which were put. OBGYN causes ruled out, but the patient is still with the obstetrician. Acquired factor VIII inhibitors causing the bleeding. Microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. Disseminated intravascular coagulation, that is where we step in. Could be obstetric in origin, doesn't seem to be. Septicemia doesn't seem to be. Septicemia producing DIC. After a vaginal this delivery and this type of nice recovery, everything happening on 10th day, doesn't seem to be, but okay. We obstetricians are very humble people. Therefore, maybe DIC following septicemia. Where is the septicemia? There are no other clinical features. The count is not in favor, but still the obstetrician thought this could be DIC. Okay, fine. One Willebrand's disease. This is one more. Now let us see each one of them. Acquired factor VIII inhibitors. Let us encounter them. Acquired factor VIII inhibitor is a rare but serious cause of secondary postpartum hemorrhage. So patient can come as a secondary postpartum hemorrhage. Her activated partial prothrombin time is typically significantly prolonged if there is a factor VIII inhibitor. Here it was only 40 seconds. Normal is 25 to 37 seconds. So it was not significantly prolonged. So this is getting ruled out boldly. We come to the next. What about microangiopathic hemolytic anemia? This may occur in peripartum period and is associated with low hemoglobin and platelets. There was low hemoglobin, but the platelets were normal. The diagnosis results in manifestation of microvascular thrombosis rather than hemorrhage. This was frank hemorrhage. There is no question of microvascular thrombosis here. Microvascular thrombosis, if at all you want to count, one could be in that case of dengue, but not here. So keep your cool. She has bled. But this is not a bleeding of microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, and her platelet count is normal. So this rules out. So then we come to our own disseminated intravascular coagulation. Could it be that? I didn't feel, but DIC is an important cause of postpartum hemorrhage. But in those cases, significant prolongation of APTT occurs. Here it was only 40 seconds, normal 25 to 37 seconds. PT is also low and fibrinogen levels are also low. Here PT level prothrombin time was 15 seconds. It was normal. Have confidence. Every time don't go on beating yourself as obstetrician. Fibrinogen level 200 milligrams, absolutely normal. So this is not DIC. So what we are left with? Von Willebrand's disease. And what happens there? The patient is presenting with secondary postpartum hemorrhage with a clinical and laboratory history indeed suggestive of VWD. There was no one to give us the family history. So that is ruled out. We could not go to that. For women with mild forms of VWD, as this case, peripartum period can be the first manifestation. Of the disease condition by presence with bleeding, as happened in this case. During pregnancy, both factor VIII and VWF levels increase, with peaks at 29 to 32 weeks, and at 35 weeks, they are highest. VWF is highest at 35 weeks. Following delivery, VWF levels may fall precipitously sometimes within the first few weeks, resulting in delayed uterine bleeding. This is what happened in this case, and therefore the medical management steps in. What was done? What is to be done? Management of von Willebrand disease includes monitoring these levels during pregnancy for 3 to 4 weeks postpartum. If you get trapped in such a case, or if one of your colleagues get it, please repeat them 3 to 4 weeks postpartum to ensure the return to baseline. Prophylaxis and treatment of VWD during pregnancy is based upon the severity of the disease and a specific type of VWD, and that is where a hematologist steps in, take their help. I'm not going to give this discussion for a very long time. We will ask for difficulties, and therefore probably within 40-45 minutes we will finish, so that you can go back to your consulting rooms. Just would like to inform you that now I'm going to tell you a short story, which is also a medical disorder, in pregnancy. And in fact, I'm going to tell a story next week in one group from Pune, and that title of that story is The Father, His Daughter, and Ruptured Uterus. I will inform you through, and I'm sure the group also will inform you through SMSs or WhatsApp messages. And that is, I love to tell stories. And this is a story which happened in our hospital. Let us see what happened. Mrs. DVB, a 29 years primigravida, conceived after ART with twins. And as soon as there is ART, everybody starts dancing and makes the obstetrician also dance. She was posted for elective LSCS at 39 weeks of pregnancy. Last week, one doctor has made Meera and me dance because she was an ART conception. Here, she was a wife of a doctor. She was herself a homeopathy graduate who had worked with some hospital in ICU. Her LSCS was uneventful. We did LSCS, everything was fine. She delivered a DADC twins, full-term AFD. She was intraoperatively not catheterized. We don't catheterize intraoperatively, and that same routine was followed. That is where thereafter, post-operatively, the problems begin, the challenge begins. What happened? On post-operative day 4, she had a pulse of 113. No fever, abdomen was soft and supple, RS-CDS were clear, tachycardia registered for the first time. Lochia was healthy, wound dressing was not stoked, but her total count was 18,600 with a polymorphs of 80%. Suspecting some confection, we also got a urine routine done, 25 to 30 WBCs per high power field. Even without catheterization, urinary tract infection postpartum is well known. You know the reasons also. She was on ciprofloxacin as per the routine of our hospital and metronidazole, to which again as per our protocol, injection amikacin at adequate dose was added. On 5th post-operative day, she first time registered a fever of 100.2 degrees and a tachycardia of 113 per minute. On insistence of her doctor husband and the physician at whom she worked in his ICU, we repeated the investigations. Her total count was now 17,400. Differential count P76, L24. It was 18,100 previously. Now it is 17,400. Last time polymorphs were 80%. Now it is 76%. She was not anemic and CRP was high. Urine still showed 10 to 12 WBCs. It was sent for culture sensitivity, and the physician at whose place this lady worked advised a levofloxacin. Sir, the culture report will wait. We can wait. We did not wait. Start levofloxacin. We start. Her tachycardia settled and she became afebrile. Therefore, she took discharge on request. But the problem continues. It did not stop. On 8th post-operative day, she came for dressing. It was a subcuticular stitch, required no removal. I did a check dressing. Wound was clean and he had healed well. But she said that, sir, I continue to have fever ranging from 100 to 101 degrees repeatedly. No engorgement of breasts. Lactation was normal. Uterus was involuting normally as it involves in a cesarean section, a post-cesarean section case. On insistence of her husband and the ICU physician, ultrasound, abdomen and pelvis was done. We got it done. She was not admitted anymore. This was on an OPD basis. Kidneys were bulky. Obviously, pregnancy changes. The sonologist rang me up. He said, sir, kidneys are bulky. I said, don't worry. Pregnancy changes. This is very fresh from delivery. Don't worry, it will reverse. Then he added, sir, the uterus is involuting normally. All other findings are normal. I said, fine, don't worry. As the persistent fever, physician started injection meropenem now. She was not admitted and insisted on home treatment. I have no problems with that. fever still continued recurring. And this is where the wife bullied the poor husband. On her own, she bullied her husband to change ongoing antibiotics except meropenem, added now tazobactam. Everything else was stopped. Levofloxacin, everything was stopped. Tazobactam added. Fever remained the same. And see here, if you can see on your screens, so many sensitivity. Sensitive to so many agents, even amoxicillin, sulbactam, amoxicillin, clavulanic acid, all, see, nearly all, it was sensitive. Amikacin sensitive, which we had already given, gentamicin sensitive, still highest form of antibiotics were given. I always joke that when such antibiotics are given, probably even if a fly sits on your skin, it will die. You need not kill it. I don't know about the coronavirus, but flies will die on such a skin. So what they did, this is where a senior steps in. Even my teacher, I met him the other day at a condolence meeting before the corona started of someone. And I told him, sir, they don't make teachers like you anymore. His opinion was sought and taken. Obstetricians have a very limited role, but we were the primary treating people. Finally, at the wit's end, a very senior physician's opinion was taken. He too immediately ruled out any obstetric cause. Such a nice person, he picked up the phone. I will pay tribute to him and give a name. He is Dr. Girish Vaishnav. He picked up the phone and told me, Pankaj, this is not your case. Stop, tell them to stop all antibiotics. And he told them also on the face, stop all antibiotics, only antipyretics as per need, and continue breastfeeding and continue your normal activities. Within less than 24 hours of stopping the antibiotics, she became afebrile. Her tachycardia settled and she was completely cured. So the comment is, antibiotics are a great help. But this can happen with antibiotics. This is a known complication of giving indiscriminate antibiotics. And therefore, be careful. The use of antibiotics we know. Let us respect antibiotics and not misuse them. So friends, we have come on the last few slides. I will be taking the questions. They will be there when I'll be closing the slide share, and there the message box will come. You can please type your questions and I have no problems. I am not a physician. Therefore, if I'm not able to answer intricate physician related questions, then you can email me. I will find the answers for you. But we will agree that pregnant women have a vast horizon to look at. She can have medical conditions, she can have surgical conditions, she can have dermatological conditions, she can have psychiatric conditions. Except pediatric conditions, she can have all conditions. And in such a situation, we have to ask for help. Let us not hesitate in asking for help. Friends, in days when treatment and information is available at a click of a button, it is very important for us to effectively filter this information. And today's session is something like that. You have all the information on Google. Google is there. My son always, whenever there is a webinar, he is in California. And he always jokes with me when I tell him, Beta, today I have a webinar. Baba, why are you required? They have Google, they will read it. And he is right. But he also gave me the answer once. And he said, Baba, the teacher is required to filter the knowledge. The human filter is required to filter the knowledge from Google so that the student is well read, well informed, and alert. This Google cannot make you. All the differential diagnosis, Google will tell you and you will panic. I don't want you to panic after being well informed. These things don't go. You read from Google, you are well read, you become well informed and start panicking. That is where teacher comes in. I used to tell my students, Daro mat. Don't be afraid. Fight. Thoko. Therefore, when Dr. Preeti, our chairman, said that always supports truth, it has been a way of life. I'm hardly afraid of such situations and such conditions. And therefore, summarizing this situation, this post Google era, I have made a small video. I am on 43 minutes. I am supposed to finish in 45 minutes. And with Vaidehi's permission, I will finish in time. And let us see what.
Sir, please continue, sir.
Yeah, I have 1 minute video to summarize, and thereafter we will have question answers. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.